Hello, hello. Happy week 6. We are transitioning into the second week of block 2, which is super exciting. So you are officially halfway through the 12-week program. That is huge. For week 6, we're going to focus a lot about intuitive eating and go a lot in depth about noticing your hunger and fullness cues, talk about some tactics to implement that could help you feel those hunger and fullness cues. And specifically, we'll talk about making peace with food, honoring your hunger, and feeling your fullness. So first, we're going to transition into making peace with food. So essentially, we want to call a truce. We want to give ourselves unconditional permission to eat. Because if we tell ourselves that we can't or we shouldn't have a particular food, it will lead to the intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. So when we finally give in to these forbidden foods, eating will be experienced with such intensity, it usually results in overeating and overwhelming guilt. So we want to make sure that throughout the day, we are giving into our cravings and our hunger cues. So how do we do that? Firstly, we want to start by altering the way we view food. So there are no longer good foods, there are no longer bad foods, just more nutrient dense and less nutrient dense. And nutrient dense foods are ones that provide us vitamins and minerals for our bodies to function properly and help us stay healthy physically and internally. Then less nutrient dense foods provide happiness and enjoyment in order for our sanity to function properly and help us stay healthy mentally. So these healthy foods and not so healthy foods both help us in different ways. And that's why we're taking away the good label and the bad label. Because at the end of the day, our body views all food as one thing, and that is fuel. Fuel for everyday activity and for exercise. It is our number one main energy source. Now, transitioning into honoring your hunger. So we want to keep our body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbs. Remember, carbs are not the enemy. They are our number one energy source. And if we choose to ignore carbs or ignore our body craving more energy, we can trigger a primal drive to overeat. And once we reach the moment of excessive hunger, all intentions of moderate, conscious eating are fleeting and irrelevant. So essentially, you're just going to give in to whatever is in your sight, firstly, and you're going to eat as much as you want, or more than that. And learning to honor this first biological signal sets the stage for rebuilding trust in yourself and in food. So how do we initiate that into our everyday lives? Firstly, take a look at these questions, and you can look at these before you start your day, before you have your first meal, just so you can really understand where your hunger's at and where it should be. So where do you feel the physical sensations of hunger in your body? Is it your literal stomach, perhaps a gnawing emptiness or growling in your stomach, maybe a subtle gnawing in your throat or esophagus, maybe a felt sense of sleepiness or lethargy throughout your body, maybe you feel fatigued, perhaps a dull headache, or sensations are experienced somewhere else, or maybe no sensation at all. So it's important to take into account where you're feeling this hunger when you are experiencing it. So that way you can recognize it throughout your days, and give in to that hunger whenever you're feeling it. So how do you feel the effects of hunger on your mood, your ability to focus, concentrate, or overall energy? Perhaps you start to notice increased thoughts of food and a desire to eat. That is a very common sign of hunger. If all your thoughts are derived from food, if that's literally all you can think about, then it's likely that you're not feeding yourself enough. And try to approach your hunger with a compassionate, non-judgmental curiosity. Remember, with intuitive eating, there are no wrong answers. This is an ongoing practice, and you don't usually get it in one day, especially if you've been accustomed to everything that diet culture has successfully ingrained in your brain. So remember, just to keep in mind, What does hunger feel like to you? The physical symptoms, the mental symptoms. You can write those down, place it on a sticky note where you see it most often. That way you can consistently remind yourself of what this feeling feels like. Now transitioning into fullness. So this is the part of intuitive eating that a lot of people tend to be challenged with. So we're going to go more in depth about it. So in order to honor your fullness, feel your fullness, you need to trust that you will give yourself the foods that you desire. So give into those cravings. Listening for the body signals that tell you that you are no longer hungry. Observing the signs that show you're comfortably full. Pause in the middle of eating and ask yourself how the food tastes and what your hunger level is. Remember, there is no failing in intuitive eating. It's an ongoing process. At times, we will eat beyond fullness and we will engage in distracted eating. But this principle is about connecting more deeply with your body's signals, not about perfection. So we're not going from 0 to 100. We're not going to go from overeating every single day to overeating never. It's a continual process, and it will take a little while for it to be solidified in your routine. So number one rule here is have patience with yourself and learn from anything that you feel isn't working. So practicing here, how can we practice feeling your fullness? One, start by taking inventory of when you most often engage in distracted eating. So is it while watching TV, scrolling through Instagram, reading a book, driving? How do these activities interfere with your ability to be present and connect with your body to feel your fullness? Plan a time to enjoy a meal in an optimal environment. So the idea is to create a space that is pleasant and free from distraction to the degree that's possible. So turning off electronics, eating while sitting down, that's a powerful way to reconnect with your body because it's a sacred time. So if you're just focusing on eating and that's the only thing you're focusing on, you'll have an easier time being in a deep connection with those fullness cues. And then pause in the middle of your meal and check in. What's your taste experience? Are your hunger cues starting to fade? Are slight signs of fullness beginning to emerge? Continue eating until you feel comfortably full. What sensations do you feel in your body? And then this is another option if you feel like you're having a hard time gauging a feeling of what that fullness is. So this 3-bite option, if you're sitting for an entire meal without distractions, it's kind of impossible. So try a 3-bite check-in. Upon the first bite, just note how you feel overall, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And then in the middle of the meal, pause for the second bite. How's the taste? Is there any emerging fullness? Then upon your last bite of food, rate your fullness. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? You can always do this in your journal that you use in the mornings or at night, or you can also start a note section in your phone to kind of keep track of how you're feeling throughout your meals. And try eating a meal with your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, try eating with your left and vice versa. This exercise immediately disrupts our habits, forcing us to pay closer attention. So that's a nice little trick that you can try to implement and see if it's a little bit easier for you to feel that fullness as well as feeling your fullness throughout the meal. So if you have any questions when it comes to these 3 principles of intuitive eating, feel free to message me, text me with whatever questions you have, and I'll answer them right away. But go ahead and try some of these fullness tactics and see if they help you. It's likely that you've often been distracted with physical objects or even your thoughts. So when you sit down and experience the meal with just yourself and just the food, and it'll be a lot easier to feel and understand where your hunger and fullness is coming from.